Welcome to the Dust Devil Dash 2024. This is a glider race where the pilot who flies the farthest from the starting airport wins. I flew in this race for the first time last year, and I won. Will I be able to defend my title this year? Let's find out. The forecast for this year's dash looks much stronger than last year's. It looks like I could fly from Southern California all the way across the state of Nevada to southern Idaho. According to the forecast, we were going to have cumulus clouds by this time today. But instead, these thin mid-level clouds showed up, and that's not a good sign. I had the dubious honor of launching first today. I say dubious because the thermals are probably weak right now, and it's unclear if I'll even be able to stay up. I pulled the release at 7,700 feet, which is the maximum tow height in this contest. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to release in a thermal, but I'm approaching a known hotspot in this area. That beeping from my Vario tells me that I'm going up, and I should circle here. But the beeping quickly fades, and I'm back to searching for a thermal. Fortunately, it isn't long before I find a weak one, and I'm able to gain about 1,000 feet. Some other competitors have launched now, and they're joining me. I have the altitude now to get on top of the highest peaks in this mountain range, where there should be stronger lift. I spot another glider circling, and that means there's a thermal there. This is a stronger one. More gliders have launched now, and we all end up climbing together in the same thermal. My plan is to ride this thermal as high as it will take me, because my next move is to the Sierra Nevada mountain range, but it's quite a distance to the north, and we still have no clouds to guide us. I've noticed that a couple of pilots left the thermal before me, and I'm wondering if I've made a mistake by staying in that thermal for too long. My thinking is that the hardest part of this race is going to be right now. Until some cumulus clouds develop, we're flying blind. At this point, this race is not about speed. It's about surviving the transition to the Sierra Nevadas, where conditions are likely to be better, and I'll be able to switch out of survival mode. The two pilots ahead of me haven't found a climb in quite a while, but two pilots behind me have found climbs right in the area where I just went through. However, I was much higher when I went through that area, and I was probably above the boundary layer, which means I was above the tops of the thermals, so I really had no chance of finding one there. Instead of zigzagging around checking for thermals over various terrain features, I should have just flown straight until I was low enough that I needed to climb. I'm flying at McCready 1 here, which means I'm flying slow to conserve my altitude. I'm not optimistic about finding a climb over this relatively flat ground, which is being shaded by these mid-level clouds. But I don't think I have the altitude to make it to the mountains in the distance, so I'm going to have to find a climb here soon. Niv Levy has fallen off into the valley at this point and seems likely to land out. Ahead of me, Dave Heffel has gotten pretty low as well. It's starting to look like this might be a very short race for all of us. I'm getting uncomfortably low myself, and the only airport in Glide, California City, is about to fall out of range. If I don't find a climb in the next few seconds, I'm going to have to throw in the towel and head for California City. This could be something. I'm going to have to make it work. I really need this climb. Damn, where'd it go? I desperately scratch around in zero sync for a few more circles. Then I finally decide that I have to give up and go to California City. Then, just in the nick of time, I run into a real thermal and manage to get 2,000 feet out of it. I'm back in business, and now I should have the altitude to make it to the Sierra Nevada mountains in front of me. Unfortunately, it looks like these brutal conditions have claimed their first victim, as Niv Levy lands out in the valley. I'm approaching the mountains, but they're completely shaded by the clouds, which will suppress the thermal activity there. However, the wind is blowing right into the slope, which means there might be some ridge lift I can use here. It isn't much, and I'm not really climbing. I'm probably a little too high above the ridge to make use of it. I gain a few hundred feet, but then I remember that I'm in a race, and I can't afford to waste time climbing in weak lift. I press on into the darkness, but then I notice that the clouds ahead are starting to get some height to them. Could these be the cumulus clouds we've been waiting for? I turn into a thermal, which starts off a little weak but gets stronger and stronger as I climb. It turned out to be a 4,200-foot monster of a climb. At 14,000 feet, I'm thousands of feet higher than the other gliders, and I'm thinking the day's finally starting to get good, and now it's time to go fast. One by one, I sample all the best-looking clouds in front of me, but they're not working. I get lower and lower and lower. I can see some better-looking clouds forming to the west of the Sierra Crest now, but I'm too low to reach them without losing glide to the airports in the valley. I'm almost down to mountaintop level now, and I'm going to be forced to make a decision here. I could cling to the eastern slopes, below mountaintop level, and hope to pick up a thermal there. Or I could make a bold move out into the valley, where the clouds look a little better. I make the bold move, which I'll soon come to regret. Let's check in on our competitors. Tom Riley is doing all right by staying above the Sierra Crest, while Dave Heffel is clinging to the eastern slopes and getting pretty low now. Meanwhile, my excursion into the valley has yielded nothing, and I'm running back to the mountains while I still can. I take a weak climb to ensure that I can get back onto the Sierras without being below mountaintop level. This little detour has cost me a ton of time. While it doesn't matter who lands first in this race, there is a finite amount of time in the day, so the faster you go, the further you can go. It doesn't look like I'm going to make it back on top of the mountain, so I'm going to be forced to look for a thermal that might be coming up one of these sunlit slopes in front of me. There are no airports in range right now, so if this doesn't work out, I'll probably be landing at Cinder Cone Dry Lake. Dry lakes can be a good place to land a glider. They tend to be fairly flat and smooth. But that's not the kind of adventure I'm looking for today. The next few minutes are going to require extreme focus from me as a pilot. Flying this close to the terrain obviously has its risks. The biggest one is probably a strong gust of wind from a strong thermal that could throw the glider into an unusual attitude from which you don't have the altitude to recover. The way to mitigate this risk is to carry a good amount of extra airspeed, which will give you the control authority to resist strong gusts of wind. I'm flying at 65 knots here, which is about 15 knots more than I would usually thermal at. For those newer glider pilots out there, please don't attempt this kind of flying until you've accumulated a substantial amount of mountain flying experience. This kind of thing is considered normal in soaring. But to use a skiing analogy, this is definitely black diamond level stuff. Man, the air is not even bumpy here. This does not seem promising. My thoughts turn to the dry lake bed and the logistics of the retrieve. But then, a glimmer of hope appears. That glimmer turned out to be a gold mine, which I plundered for 7,600 feet of altitude. What a stroke of luck. Surely this means that things will be better from now on. The clouds ahead are certainly looking better, with their flat bottoms and well-defined edges. When you fly in the Dust Devil Dash, you need ground crew who follow you in a car towing your trailer. Wherever you end up landing, they'll come pick you up and you put the glider back in the trailer. Now that I'm nice and high, I take a moment to update my crew on my progress and eat some lunch. I run into some turbulence at an inconvenient time and nearly lose my lunch, but not in the usual way.
Holy cow.
It looks like Dave Heffel is about to land out in the valley. I have to admire his tenacity in getting this far without ever really getting a solid climb. Sometimes bad luck will shoot you down in this sport. Britton Bluedorn has also been scratching for quite a while and is forced to land at Lone Pine. Tom Riley has crossed the Owens Valley to the Inyo Mountains and is doing well, but I'm not aware of that because he's too far away for me to see. The Inyos weren't forecast to be strong today, and the hazy conditions make it a bit hard to read the clouds over there, so I decided to stay on the Sierras. I'm approaching Mount Whitney, the pinnacle of the Sierra Nevada, and the highest mountain in the contiguous United States. The clouds ahead are small and ragged looking, which means the lift is likely to be weak. I take a short climb to cloud base, then I spot a convergence line that runs up the eastern slopes of the Sierras. I've gone quite a while without finding a decent climb. The clouds ahead are looking a little better, but I'm starting to get a bit low. The nearest airport is pretty far away at Bishop, so at this point, I'm going to take what I can get. Behind me in the distance, my good friend David Crowder is working his way up the Sierras. We'll see him again later. I'm approaching Coyote Flats, and at this point I'm low enough that I'm looking at the ground instead of the clouds to find my next thermal. I spot a cinder cone with sun on it, and I figure there's gotta be a thermal coming off of it. Freestanding peaks like that make great thermal triggers. There's a little something there, but that peak was probably shaded by clouds earlier, and it hasn't had enough time to warm up yet. I press on towards the next patch of sun on the ground. The strategy works this time, and I get into the first strong climb in a while. This has been a slow run up the Sierras. I've averaged only 92 kilometers per hour cross-country speed, and that's not good. I spot a well-defined cloud street cutting across the Owens Valley to the White Mountains, and I see my ticket off the Sierras. In the distance, I can see tall, puffy clouds over the Great Basin, and I know I'll start making better time once I get there. Tom Riley has already left the Inyo Mountains and is cutting east toward Tonopah. Meanwhile, Jim Payne and his wife Jackie, in a two-seat duodiscus, are quickly catching up with Tom and I. Jim Payne is a well-known and respected glider pilot, and when I saw him show up at the race this morning, I knew he was going to be a serious contender. I found another solid climb, and I'm making an excellent glide ratio on this cloud street, so things are looking up. This cloud is tall with a flat, dark bottom. It should provide a good climb. That frantic beeping from the Vario tells me I'm in rising air, and now's the time to circle. If you're not a glider pilot, that beeping may sound annoying. But if you are a glider pilot, you learn to love that sound because it means you're going up and you found a thermal. The faster the beeping and the higher the pitch, the faster you're climbing. So when that Vario starts beeping wildly, you get excited. But why does it need to beep? Can't you just look at the dial on the instrument panel? Well, when you're flying an aircraft, it's not a good idea to have your head down in the cockpit looking at the instruments the whole time. You need to have your eyes looking outside to make sure you don't hit another aircraft or the side of the mountain, and to just maintain your situational awareness. The beeping from the Vario gives you a constant stream of information about that all-important variable, where the lift is. And you don't have to keep your eyes glued to an instrument in the cockpit to get it. Anyway, back to the flight. I've just left the White Mountains and I'm now headed north toward Hawthorne. The flight up until now has been a bit of a struggle. But now that I'm in the good stuff, I can stop thinking about merely surviving and start focusing on actually flying fast. This is a race after all. This 8.6 knot thermal confirms that it's go time. After a long 65-kilometer glide, I finally find a good thermal, and I take it all the way to the top. Since I left the White Mountains, my average cross-country speed has been a blazing 162 kilometers per hour. The clouds are beginning to seriously overdevelop, and I'm having to navigate around a lot of rainstorms. Let's talk about how I got here and where I'm planning to go next. I started at Tehachapi in Southern California and flew up the Sierra Nevada range. Then I cut across the Owens Valley to the White Mountains, and shortly afterward entered western Nevada. From there I flew northeast to Austin. Why did I and every other pilot decide to go this direction? Well, for one, the soaring weather was forecast to be the best in Nevada. But also the wind was flowing to the northeast, so by going this direction, we are flying downwind the whole way. With that tailwind, we can fly faster and cover more ground over the course of the day. In planning this flight, I settled on Austin as a key stepping stone to many of the likely endpoints in northern Nevada. My stretched goals for today are all on the northern border of Nevada, at McDermott, Owahee, and Jackpot via Elko. However, that plan is looking questionable right now due to all the rain I'm seeing around me. Fortunately, the path to Austin is not blocked by storms, and that's a good thing because I'm committed to Austin at this point. I have no other airports in range. However, I can't quite see all the way to Austin right now, and I'm worried that when I get there it might be covered by a storm. What am I going to do if I get there and there's a downpour with lightning and it's not safe to land? I can see two options. One would be to back off and stay airborne until the storm passes. The other is to land on this dry lake bed, which I know nothing about, but will probably do in a pinch. I arrive at Austin, which is one of the only places around where it isn't raining. Since I'm near the town of Austin, I'm able to get cell signal, so I pull up my phone and look at the rain radar. I'm here in Austin, and I want to get to Battle Mountain. The blue and green areas on the map are where it's raining, and there's an awful lot of it between here and Battle Mountain. There's a little less rain in the direction of Eureka. I could possibly get there by going around it. But is it worth the risk? I can see on my phone that Tom Riley has already landed at Eureka, and Jim Payne has somehow made it through the weather to Battle Mountain. Getting to Eureka isn't going to win me this race. In order to win, I would have to make it to Battle Mountain, or wherever Jim Payne ends up landing. A tie would go to me because my glider has less performance and a better handicap. But trying to punch through this stormy weather is just too risky. It's not worth it. Jim Payne went through there about 15 minutes before I got here. That may have been just before the weather got this bad. Looking back on my decision to stay on the Sierras instead of crossing to the Inyos may have been the mistake that caused me to get here just a few minutes too late. It looks like I'm stuck at Austin. I spend a few minutes thinking about my other options while my friend David Crowder catches up with me. We talk things over on the radio and decide that landing at Austin is a better idea than trying to push through to Eureka. We won't have to wait as long for our ground crew to show up, and we'll be eating dinner and getting to a hotel at a reasonable hour. Before the race, I told my ground crew Chris that I was only going to try to get to the Idaho border if it meant that I would win the race. Otherwise, I'd much prefer to not have a late night while waiting for a retrieve. A car chasing a glider usually can't keep up, because the roads don't follow the exact path that the glider is flying.
Austin traffic, letter 7, left base for runway 1. visor or runway light sticking up on each side.
How do you feel? It is. Austin Airport's an interesting place. It's in the middle of nowhere, but there happens to be a collection of rusty old Russian tanks on display. David's ground crew showed up just as the weather was closing in on us. We saw a few lightning strikes nearby, but we managed to get out of there before we got wet. We got my glider back in the trailer just as the sun was setting. And we headed into the little town of Austin for some fantastic pizza. I owe a huge thanks to Christopher Stevenson for being my ground crew and driving all day from Tehachapi to Austin. The Dust Devil Dash wouldn't happen without generous people like him. Congratulations to Jim and Jackie Payne for winning this year's Dash. I can't wait for the next one. Thanks for watching. See you next time.